Women over 60, stop doing these 5 things that age you emotionally. What if the things making you feel older, more tired, and less vibrant have nothing to do with your physical age and everything to do with emotional habits you've unknowingly carried for years? While we often focus on physical aging, emotional aging can be even more limiting. And unlike physical aging, it's completely reversible once you recognize it. Welcome back to 60 Wise Living Advice, where we celebrate the beauty, wisdom, and endless possibilities of life after 60. Today, we're talking about something that doesn't get nearly enough attention: emotional aging. You know those women who seem younger than their years, not because of their skin or their bodies, but because of their energy, their openness, their zest for life. And then there are women who seem older than their chronological age, weighed down by something intangible but unmistakable. The difference isn't luck or genetics. It's often these 5 specific emotional habits that age us from the inside out. Maya Angelou once said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." But I'd add this: there's no greater drain on your vitality than carrying emotional patterns that weigh you down, close you off, and keep you stuck in the past while life keeps moving forward. Here's what's important to understand before we dive in. These aren't character flaws, and if you recognize yourself in any of these patterns, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. These are learned behaviors, coping mechanisms that may have served you at some point, but are now holding you back from the vibrant, open, engaged life you deserve. And because they're learned, they can be unlearned. The beautiful thing about addressing emotional aging is that the results can be immediate. Unlike physical aging, which changes slowly over time, emotional patterns can shift quickly once you recognize them and make conscious choices to change. You can literally feel years younger, more energetic, more hopeful, more engaged with life within weeks of releasing these aging patterns. If this is your first time here, I'm so glad you found us. Please consider subscribing and joining thousands of women who understand that aging beautifully isn't just about taking care of our bodies. It's about tending to our emotional and mental well-being with equal care and attention. So, let's talk honestly about these 5 emotional habits that age us prematurely, and more importantly, how to release them so you can reclaim the vitality and openness that might have been buried under years of protective patterns. The first thing: living in the past instead of the present. The first emotional habit that ages you faster than anything else is spending more time dwelling in the past than living in the present. We all have memories, histories, stories that shaped us. But there's a profound difference between having a past and living in it. And that difference shows up in everything from your energy to your face to how others experience you. Living in the past looks like constantly bringing up the way things used to be, filtering every present experience through comparisons to earlier times, dwelling on regrets and missed opportunities, or staying stuck in grievances and hurts from years or decades ago. When your mental energy is predominantly focused backward rather than forward or present, you're essentially aging yourself emotionally every single day. Think about how this shows up in conversation. Do you find yourself frequently saying things like, "back in my day," or "things were better when," or "I used to be able to"? These aren't just innocent phrases. They're signals that you're living in the past tense, and that ages you more than any physical change ever could. Margaret, 68, didn't realize how much she'd fallen into this pattern until her adult daughter gently pointed it out. "Mom, every story you tell is about things that happened 20 or 30 years ago. What about now? What's happening in your life today that excites you?" Margaret was stunned into silence because she realized she didn't have a good answer. I'd become so focused on my memories, the good old days when I was younger, prettier, more active, that I'd stopped creating new experiences worth remembering. I was essentially living my life in reverse, constantly looking back instead of forward. When Margaret made a conscious decision to shift her focus to the present and future, actively creating new experiences, pursuing new interests, talking about what she was currently excited about rather than what she used to do, the change was remarkable. People started responding to me differently. I felt more energetic, more engaged, more alive. It was like I had been carrying this heavy backward pull, and releasing it freed up tremendous energy. This doesn't mean you should never reminisce, or that your past doesn't matter. Your history is part of who you are. But when the past becomes your primary residence, instead of a place you occasionally visit, you're robbing yourself of the vitality that comes from being fully present and open to what's happening now. The antidote is simple but requires consciousness. Notice when you're dwelling in the past and gently redirect your attention to the present moment and future possibilities. Ask yourself regularly, what am I creating in my life right now? What am I looking forward to? What's interesting or beautiful about this current moment? The second thing, closing yourself off to new experiences. The second emotional habit that ages you prematurely is gradually closing yourself off to new experiences, new people, new ideas, and new ways of doing things. This happens so gradually that most people don't even notice it's happening. You start saying no more than yes. Your world slowly shrinks, and before you know it, you're living in a comfortable but increasingly small bubble. This shows up in all kinds of ways. Refusing to learn new technology because it's too complicated, declining invitations to try new activities because that's not really my thing, avoiding new friendships because I already have enough friends, dismissing new ideas or perspectives because I'm too old to change now. Each of these small closings might seem insignificant, but together they create an emotional rigidity that ages you far more than wrinkles ever could. The irony is that we often frame this closing off as wisdom or knowing ourselves, when it's actually fear disguised as preference. I'm set in my ways sounds better than I'm afraid of being uncomfortable, but the effect is the same. You stop growing, stop expanding, and start contracting into an increasingly limited version of yourself. Dorothy, 71, caught herself in this pattern when she realized she'd been saying no to almost every invitation her friends extended. New restaurant? I prefer the places I already know. Book club? I don't really like group discussions. Dance class? I'm too old to start something like that. Concert in the park? I'm not really into crowds anymore. My friend finally said to me, "Dorothy, when did you become so closed off? You used to be adventurous and open to everything." Dorothy shared. It hit me hard because she was right. I'd been slowly closing doors without even realizing it, telling myself I was just becoming more selective, when really I was becoming more fearful. When Dorothy challenged herself to say yes to new experiences, even when they felt uncomfortable or outside her usual preferences, something shifted. I tried foods I never would have ordered, went to events I would have skipped, had conversations with people I might have avoided. Some experiences I loved, some I didn't, but all of them made me feel more alive, more engaged, more like myself at my best. Staying open doesn't mean you have to like everything or try everything. It means maintaining curiosity and willingness to expand rather than constantly contracting. It means recognizing that discomfort is often where growth happens, and growth is what keeps us emotionally young, regardless of our chronological age. The practice here is to notice your automatic no responses and question them. Is this really a preference, or is it fear dressed up as one? Challenge yourself to try one new thing regularly, a new food, a new route, a new activity, a new conversation.
Keep expanding rather than contracting, and you'll be amazed at how this reverses emotional aging.
The third emotional habit that ages you dramatically is carrying resentment, old hurts, grudges, and unprocessed anger from your past. These emotional burdens are like carrying a heavy backpack everywhere you go. They drain your energy, color your perspective, and show up in your face, your posture, and your overall presence in ways you might not even realize. Resentment ages you because it keeps you emotionally tethered to painful past experiences. Every time you replay old hurts, rehearse conversations about how you were wronged, or hold on to anger about things that happened years or even decades ago, you're essentially reliving those painful moments over and over. Your body and emotions don't distinguish between past and present pain. When you dwell on old hurts, you experience the stress response as if they're happening now. This shows up as bitterness in your tone when you talk about certain people or situations, tension in your body when particular topics come up, or a general heaviness in your energy that makes people feel drained rather than energized around you. You might not even realize how much these old emotional weights are affecting you until you finally release them. Linda, 66, carried deep resentment toward her ex-husband for over a decade after their divorce. Every time I thought about him, which was often, I'd feel this surge of anger about how he'd treated me, how he'd wasted my time, how unfair everything had been, she shared. I thought I was justified in my anger. He had wronged me, after all. But Linda began noticing how this constant resentment was affecting her current life. I'd bring him up in conversations even when it wasn't relevant. I could feel my face get tight and my voice get hard whenever his name came up. I started seeing how this old anger was poisoning my present, making it harder for me to trust new relationships, and honestly, just making me feel tired and old. When Linda finally worked through releasing this resentment, not for his sake, but for her own, the transformation was visible. People commented that I seemed lighter, younger, more open. I had more energy because I wasn't constantly burning it on old anger. My face actually looked softer because I wasn't carrying that constant tension. Releasing resentment doesn't mean what happened to you was okay or that you condone how you were treated. It means you're refusing to let past pain continue poisoning your present. It's choosing your own peace and vitality over the satisfaction of holding a grudge. The work here often requires help, whether from a therapist, a support group, or trusted friends. But the first step is recognizing what you're carrying and acknowledging how much it's costing you in terms of your energy, your openness, and your emotional vitality. When you release these old burdens, you literally free up energy that can flow toward creating the life you want now.
The fourth thing, focusing on what's wrong instead of what's possible. The fourth emotional habit that ages you is developing a predominantly negative focus, constantly noticing what's wrong, what's declining, what's being lost, rather than what's possible, what's working, and what's being gained. This negative focus becomes a lens through which you filter everything, and that lens ages you emotionally faster than almost anything else. This shows up in how you talk about your health. Everything hurts these days. Your life stage, my best years are behind me. Current events, the world is going to hell. And even daily experiences, nothing is as good as it used to be. When your default mode is complaint, criticism, and negativity, you're training your brain to see life through an aging, declining lens, even when that's not the full picture. The insidious thing about this pattern is that it feels like you're just being realistic or honest about challenges. But there's a crucial difference between acknowledging difficulties honestly and dwelling in negativity as your default state. One allows you to address problems while maintaining hope and energy. The other drains your vitality and makes you someone others instinctively avoid. Patricia, 69, didn't realize how negative she'd become until she started journaling and noticed a pattern. Almost every entry was complaints about my health, about politics, about how things used to be better, about people who disappointed me, she shared. I thought it was just venting, but when I read back through months of entries, I was shocked at how relentlessly negative I'd become. Patricia challenged herself to a simple practice. For every negative thing she noticed or mentioned, she had to identify something positive. At first, it felt forced and fake, but gradually, I started naturally noticing positive things I'd been filtering out. The world hadn't changed, my focus had. The shift in Patricia's energy was remarkable. People started seeking out my company more. I felt lighter, more hopeful, more energized. I realized that my negative focus had been like carrying around dark-colored glasses that made everything look dimmer and more hopeless than it actually was. This doesn't mean becoming unrealistically positive or denying real difficulties. It means consciously balancing your focus so you're not exclusively dwelling on problems, decline, and loss. It means actively looking for what's working, what's possible, what's beautiful, and what's worth celebrating even in the midst of genuine challenges. The practice is noticing your default focus. When you think about your day, do you naturally gravitate toward what went wrong or what went well? When you talk with others, are you mostly complaining or sharing a balanced perspective? Start consciously shifting your attention toward possibility, gratitude, and what's working, and watch how this simple change reverses emotional aging almost immediately. What's one practice that's helped you maintain a positive focus even during challenging times? Sometimes the smallest shifts in perspective create the biggest changes in how young and vital we feel. Share your insights in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what another woman needs to hear today.
The fifth thing is isolating instead of connecting. The fifth and perhaps most damaging emotional habit that ages you is gradually withdrawing from connection and isolating yourself, whether physically, emotionally, or both. This often happens so slowly you don't notice. You decline a few invitations, stop reaching out to friends as often, spend more time alone, and before you know it, isolation has become your norm rather than the exception. Isolation ages you because humans are fundamentally social creatures. We need connection, engagement, and meaningful relationships, not just for happiness, but for our basic vitality and health. When you withdraw from connection, everything suffers. Your mood, your energy, your mental sharpness, your motivation, and yes, even your physical health. This withdrawal often starts with reasonable-sounding justifications. I'm more introverted now. People are exhausting. I prefer my own company. I'm too tired to socialize. I don't have as much in common with people anymore. But underneath these explanations is often fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being vulnerable, fear of not fitting in, fear of being hurt or disappointed. The problem is that isolation creates a vicious cycle. The more you withdraw, the more difficult connection feels, which makes you withdraw further. Meanwhile, you're missing out on the vitality that comes from engagement, the mental stimulation of interesting conversations, the energy exchange of meaningful connection, and the simple joy of shared experiences. Eleanor, 72, found herself increasingly isolated after her husband passed away. I just stopped going out, she admitted. My coupled friends didn't know what to do with me alone. I felt awkward in social situations, and honestly, it just seemed easier to stay home. I convinced myself I was fine with my own company. But Eleanor wasn't fine. She started noticing that I felt older, more tired, less interested in life. Days would blend together because I wasn't having experiences worth remembering. I was aging rapidly,
Not because of my physical age, but because I was essentially shutting down emotionally. When Eleanor forced herself to re-engage, joining a book club, reaching out to old friends, even just going to coffee shops to be around people, the transformation was remarkable. I felt younger almost immediately, having things to look forward to, conversations that stimulated my mind, connections that reminded me I matter. It was like turning on lights in a dark house. Connection doesn't have to mean constant socializing or huge friend groups. It means maintaining regular, meaningful engagement with others, staying open to new relationships, nurturing existing connections, and refusing to let isolation become your default state. The practice here is to actively maintain and create connection, even when it feels easier not to. Reach out to friends regularly rather than waiting for them to reach out to you. Say yes to invitations even when staying home sounds more comfortable. Create opportunities for connection by joining groups, taking classes, or volunteering. Treat connection as essential maintenance for your emotional vitality, because it is.
As we wrap up today's conversation, I want you to really take this in. Emotional aging is far more within your control than physical aging, and addressing it can make you feel literally years younger almost immediately. The 5 habits we've explored, living in the past, closing off to new experiences, carrying old resentments, focusing on negativity, and isolating yourself, these aren't character flaws. They're protective patterns that have outlived their usefulness and are now holding you back from the vibrant life you deserve. The beautiful thing about recognizing these patterns is that awareness itself is the first step toward change. You can't shift what you don't see, but once you see these habits clearly, you have the power to choose differently. And unlike physical aging, which changes slowly over time, emotional patterns can shift quickly once you bring consciousness and intention to changing them. Imagine how it would feel to release the weight of past resentments you've been carrying for years, to open yourself to new experiences with curiosity instead of fear, to focus on possibilities instead of problems, to live fully in the present instead of constantly looking backward, to feel connected and engaged instead of isolated and withdrawn. This isn't fantasy. This is available to you starting today, with each small choice you make to release these aging patterns. What makes this work so powerful is that it doesn't just make you feel younger emotionally. It shows up in everything. Your energy, your presence, how others experience you, the opportunities that come your way, the quality of your relationships, and yes, even your physical vitality. Emotional well-being and physical well-being are deeply interconnected, and when you address one, you inevitably affect the other. Remember, you've spent decades developing these patterns, so be patient with yourself as you work to release them. This isn't about perfection or instant transformation. It's about noticing these habits when they arise, making conscious choices to respond differently, and gradually building new patterns that support the vibrant, engaged, open-hearted woman you want to be. If this message has helped you recognize patterns that might be aging you emotionally, please consider subscribing to our 60 Wise Living Advice family. When you subscribe, you're joining a community of women who understand that aging beautifully means tending to our emotional and mental well-being with the same care we give our physical health. And please, share this video with another woman who might be unknowingly carrying these aging patterns. Sometimes we all need someone to shine a light on habits we can't see ourselves, and this conversation might be exactly what she needs to reclaim her emotional vitality. Until we meet again next week, remember this: you are not destined to become more closed off, bitter, negative, or isolated as you age. Those aren't inevitable consequences of getting older. They're learned patterns you have the power to unlearn. Every day offers new opportunities to choose openness over closure, presence over dwelling in the past, release over resentment, positivity over negativity, and connection over isolation. Keep choosing vitality, beautiful souls.
The world needs women who understand that emotional aging is optional, and that at any age, we have the power to feel more alive, more engaged, and more vibrant simply by releasing the patterns that no longer serve us.